Okay, thank you so much everyone for joining us today for our webinar on estimating legal needs for CLC planning and reporting purposes. My name's Carly Hansen and I'm one of the Sector Sustainability Coordinators here at Community Legal Centres Queensland. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're holding today's webinar. In Brisbane, Meanjin, they are the Turrbal and the Yagara people. I wish to pay my respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that these are stolen lands and that sovereignty was never ceded. As this webinar is being viewed by people throughout Queensland and Australia, and because we've also got presenters joining us from interstate, I'd also like to pay respect to the traditional owners throughout the country and extend a very warm welcome to any First Nations people who are joining us today. So today I'm really pleased to welcome Delphine Bellerose and Jeff Mulharen from the Law and Justice Foundation, who will be talking to us about estimating legal needs for CLC planning and reporting purposes. So as we know, getting a better understanding of legal need in the community is a really key aspect of planning legal services. This involves not only understanding the extent of legal need, but also the nature and geographic location of the need. While CLCs are generally well placed to have an understanding of the needs of their clients and communities, legal need can be estimated much more comprehensively with the help of data. So in today's webinar, Delphine and Jeff will take us through how CLCs can bring together data from commonly used data sources to provide an evidence-based approach to estimating legal needs. The webinar will also introduce resources available to support the legal assistance sector with service planning, including a tutorial demonstration of the National Legal Needs Dashboard. So I'll hand over to Delphine and Jeff in a moment and let them tell you a little bit more about themselves. But just before I do that, a bit of quick housekeeping. So today's webinar is being recorded and we'll have that recording available for you to download hopefully this afternoon. There are some PowerPoints today, but they haven't been shared with the audience. With Jeff and Delphine's permission, I'll share those following the presentation. But the main sort of bulk of the session, as I mentioned, will be a demo. So you'll be able to see the dashboard in action. We will obviously encourage you to ask questions, and you can feel free to type those questions into the question box on the GoToWebinar control panel as we go through, and there'll be a couple of points throughout the session where we'll pause just to check if there are any questions at that stage, and we'll also deal with some questions at the end of the session. So that's probably all from me at the moment. I'll now hand over to Jeff and Delphine from the Law and Justice Foundation. Thanks, guys. Take it away.
Thanks, Carly, and thank you to CLC Queensland for inviting us to participate in this webinar series. We hope we can provide some useful information today. And many of you, I can't see you, but I may know many of you, and so I say hello to all of you. Delphine is joining me. Delphine is one of our senior researchers at the Foundation, and she is the real brains behind much of this dashboard work. So she's the, as I said, the brains one. There's only any complex questions Delphine might grab, but Delphine will be managing the dashboard as we go through today, and we'll see how we go. Let me begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land. Ordinarily, I'd be saying to you I was probably coming from our offices, which is on Gadigal land of the Eora Nation in Sydney, but we're in stay-at-home orders here. So in actual fact, today I'm coming here from Wallumattagal land, and Delphine is in Bidjigal land, and so we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're on, and on the land on which all of you are at the moment, and we pay respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders, past, present, and emerging. Okay, so what we'd like to do today is go through some information what we're doing in terms of planning legal need as we've discussed before. Now, the Foundation, for many of you would be aware that we have had a long involvement in identifying the legal needs of communities and in terms of and what works to address them, plus providing tools to support legal assistance services. For those who've been around for a while, the collaborative planning resource, for example, that back in 2015 to support the NPA as it was then, the Foundation delivered. The Foundation, of course, has done the legal needs surveys and so forth. And so we've been in this game for a while, and we're always keen to try and do the best we can to provide you with information that might you would need. Much of our work does focus on this cycle. Many of you will have seen it before. You'll see it again elsewhere, but it's a sort of cycle of planning legal assistance and planning anything really, but planning legal assistance where, you start off by identifying the needs first. You need to know where that need is. You also need to know what strategies work to address those needs. Taylor, you got to deliver them where they're needed, and then monitor and evaluation. It's a cycle. We make this point because there's a number of steps. There's a range of different information sources that really should be provided and should be made available to legal assistance services to help them do the job. It's not just about needs. It's not just about service data. For those of you who are working in response to the NLAP at the moment, you might get a sense that it's all about service data. That's one component, but it's only one small component of the whole picture, and I think we'll cover that a bit more broadly today. Today, we're going to go through looking at the issue of estimating legal needs, what data could be used, what's available, and readily. We're going to talk about a couple of dashboards we've developed, a couple of them that are available now for use, and one that might be coming, and some other information. All right, so how to estimate the level of and nature of legal need in your jurisdiction and relevant regions? The first thing to say is that there is no one robust measure or indicator for the extent of legal need that can be identified by various geographical areas in Australia. There is not one, and that's not surprising. It's a much more complex issue than that. So how do we go about estimating it? Well, there's a number of different tools and data sources that are used, that have been used in Australia and around the world. And we'll touch on a couple of them now. Legal needs surveys. Many of you will be aware of legal needs surveys internationally, but in Australia. The most recent one, published in 2012, the Law Survey, the large survey that the Foundation did, about 21,000 people across the country. That was one of the largest in the world. But what do legal needs surveys provide us? Well, simply put, if done properly, they are the only way to get a representative picture of legal need across the whole community. And that's sort of been recognised widely globally now. The only way to get a representative picture, to the extent that's important. Now, it tells us about the legal need in the whole community, leaving out some certain groups that you might not be able to reach. Identifies vulnerability of particular groups. It allows us to look at if you get a large enough sample, you can do some reasonably appropriate, reasonably advanced statistical analysis. Some of you will remember or be aware of the paper we published in 2019 on the impact of family and domestic violence on legal need, and we found that victims of domestic violence were remarkably something like 10 times the vulnerability, had 10 times the vulnerability to other legal problems than most other Australians, and many of these problems had nothing to do with the initial violence. We were unable to do that analysis by having a large representative sample from the survey. We were able to redo the analysis by looking at people who had reported they had been victims of domestic or family violence, and then do the analyses all over again coming from that angle. So legal needs surveys provide us that sort of opportunity. And we can generalise the findings to the general population. But they have some problems. They are costly and take time to do. And almost never will there be enough information down to small geographic areas. If you think about it, if you survey about 20,000 people across the country, when you start getting down to suburbs or postcodes or LGAs, there's probably only a very small number of people there, and you really can't make assumptions or conclusions out of that. So legal needs surveys have an absolute, very important place, but they don't answer all the questions. Official data. What about census data, that sort of stuff? Well, official data can be very important, such as census, because it's reliable population counts. It gets down to where everybody is in quite small areas. It's readily available and it's quite cost effective, generally speaking. So things like census data, official data, can be very useful, but they don't actually of itself tell you actually about the need for legal assistance, and so they have the limitations in that way as well. Other things such as indicators of disadvantage, like CIFA, quite popular. They talk about disadvantage, and we know there's a strong connection between disadvantage and legal problems, numbers of legal problems, and they can give an index of rate down to small areas. But they don't actually refer to legal need per se, and more importantly, they provide an index. They don't actually give you a count of potential need, potential people, and so it's hard for legal assistance services to actually have a scale of potential need in that area. So they have weaknesses as well. All right, what about targeted data and knowledge? Well, this is potentially very important in certain contexts, and can be a strength of CLCs. So by targeted data, we're talking here about focusing on local knowledge, focusing on specific populations, remote communities, housing commission areas, remote Indigenous communities, that sort of stuff. And by talking about things like deep engagement with communities over long term, understanding contextual factors, that really is a really important way of deeply understanding the legal needs of particularly vulnerable communities. It's obviously high intensity work. There's obviously a limit to how many of those communities, that sort of deep engagement, any service can have. I mean, everyone's limited in size and scale and scope, but that's certainly a way of targeting those communities. I mean, let's face it, a survey coming around every few years is just not going to give you the same insight about the legal needs of those communities, that sort of long-term deep engagement. But as I said, they have limitations as well, like all do. They're not representative of the general population, and so as a result, their findings aren't transferable. But also there's a simple issue of scale. As each individual CLC will know, there's only a certain number of communities, and that you can actually, unless you are funded a whole lot better than you probably are, there's a limit to what you can actually do. All right, service data. Now, for those of you who've are intimately involved in planning and all the work involved with the NLAP implementation, you might get a sense that service data is really, really important, and service data can be very important. But the NLAP seems to have a bit of a focus on that. But where does it really fit in the big scheme of things? Well, at one level, and at the local level, and for individual community legal centres, it can be very important, because there's no doubt about it that at the local level, the clients that you engage with and you deal with, you will see, key changes, for example, if factories close, if natural disasters come about, if there are changes in police practice, introductions of new laws, such as new health order fines, for example, which are a big issue in New South Wales, you will see the impact. Hopefully, if you're well engaged with the communities, you will see the impact in the clients you see. And so in that sense, changes in service data is important. The number of inquiries you get in lockdown periods on domestic and family violence issues, these can be really important indicators at the local level in particular. But on the other hand, service data can be quite limited. By service data, we are talking about that administrative data collected by services at the clients that you serve. In many ways, its strength is also its weaknesses. It tells you about the services you've delivered, and depending on how the data is collected, you get a lot of information about the clients themselves, the client profiles, and so that's a real positive. But the problem is, its limitation is also, it only tells you about the services you've delivered. So all those people that don't come to your service, that don't know about your service, that try but can't get there, that try but you turn them away because you don't have the resources, that wait too long on the phone to get through, that come but that they don't come within the eligibility criteria that the particular service has. All those people, all those legal needs won't appear in the data. And so it is skewed by those who turn up and those who actually are eligible for a service. And so that is a real limitation, particularly at the macro level, of service data as a measure of legal need. It really does tell you what the service is delivered as opposed to what the need is in particular. And I think if I give an extreme example about that, and I won't say which state, and it wasn't yours and it wasn't ours, but there was another state where a review led to a reduction in CLCs in certain areas, and certainly CLC outreach in regional remote areas, and surprise, surprise, the numbers of inquiries dropped, and that would suggest that the way to reduce legal need in your state is to close all of your services, and need will drop if you think that service numbers actually indicate a fair representation of the need. And the answer is they're not. And so we need to be careful about how we view service data and what it actually tells you on its own. In a context, we'll see how it can be very valuable. And of course, at the local level, for CLCs that are well engaged with the communities, I know you are, it can be very useful in that local context. All right, so let's move on. So how do we go about estimating legal needs and what sort of data sources we've got? Well, we've got a bit of a jigsaw puzzle, and it will vary from place to place. Okay, you've got legal needs surveys, which give you a good overall picture and give you a representative sample if they're done well. I might add that in surveys, the Productivity Commission suggested there should be a legal needs survey done actually every 5 years, I think it was, and unfortunately that has not yet happened. It also, of course, recommended that an extra $200 million go straight to the legal assistance sector, and that hasn't happened either. Census and official data, again, a very important source, particularly getting down to reliable data down to local small geographies. Ad hoc research, targeting particular groups, very important. Service data in its place, important, but particularly at the local level, less so at the macro level, and less so at giving you a representative picture. Courts data, police data, particularly in the criminal space, but more broadly than that, that can tell you a lot about what's happening as well, and we'll cover that courts and police data a bit later if we have time. Social service data from Centrelink, the data all the people who are getting benefits from Centrelink, for example, which goes to the heart of disadvantage, that can be very useful as well. It can be quite, you can actually focus on which groups, which benefits are most likely to be present in the target groups that you're looking at, and that can be useful information, and we'll cover that shortly. Health and social research data, and finally, local knowledge, experience, engagement. These are all factors that come together that you can delve on, depends on which group you're trying to reach. All right, so that leads us into the National Legal Needs Dashboard, which is the first, and it's going to take up probably the most of the rest of the session. The National Legal Needs Dashboard, which we have developed to bring together some of that information. And I might add that part of this process is actually to get feedback from you. It doesn't have to be today, but at a later stage, about what data sources, we'll go through a range of them, but what data sources you'd like to have included in this for you to actually use for your planning. Okay, so basically we brought together a collection of data sources, which we'll go through shortly, that helps you identify where the legal needs might exist geographically. Various geographies are available, and it allows planning at all levels. When I say all levels, at a national level, at a jurisdictional level, state level, and down at the regional, local level. All right, so what we might do now is we might change, and we will move across to the demonstration now using the Legal Needs Dashboard. As that change is taking place, or it's up there now already, I'll make just another couple of points before we get into a general description. We sort of put this dashboard as somewhere between a beta and a prototype. I say a prototype only because we're using Tableau Public because people are very used to it. It's been a convenient tool to do this, but ultimately in the long term, we may move to another platform. So it's still development in that sense. We're still also trying to work out which other data sources that might be relevant. But it's beta because there's an awful lot of data in here, a lot of valuable data in here that you can use now to actually do a lot of things that could be of use to you. And so it really is a beta version getting full comments. So first thing I'd say. Second thing I'd say is that it is under development. You probably understand that in development, something like this, where space is an issue, sometimes we have to make some abbreviations and acronyms. I do apologise for the fact that in the development of this, we have at times used the acronym ATSI. That is being replaced progressively by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander or First Nations in due course. But in this sort of, I guess, this beta phase, we have used that in a few places, and apologies for that, but we've had to do it in a couple of places. And as I said, we are very keen at feedback about which data sources would be worth including, and we'll come up with some suggestions for that shortly, and also which ones we'd like to use more of, less of, and like. Okay, all right. So that brings us to the dashboard, and Delphine will be driving the dashboard. She will correct me when I go wrong or say something silly. But what we'll do now is we'll start off with a description of the dashboard. Actually, before I start that though, Carly, has anyone asked any urgent questions before we go on to the dashboard at this point?
No, we don't have any questions yet, so I'll keep checking on those. But yeah,
okay,
all good.
All right. So let's describe a bit of a description of the dashboard. Some of you might have seen this before. Let's go through it. So first of all, we have the map. The top left-hand corner is the map, and the map is a geographic distribution, shall I say, of potential legal needs. That map as it's now is based on NLAS capability. Now, NLAS is one of the foundations. We've developed a number of indicators which we call need for legal assistance services. There have been a number of papers we published about that. We can explain that separately. And there's a number of need for legal assistance services indicators we'll come to. The darker the shading, the higher the number, which is an indicator of potential legal need for people who have, has lower education, lower income, and if they have a legal problem, are likely to need legal assistance. All right. On the right-hand side, we have 4 bar charts, and they indicate which are based on a number of indicators, looking at which are really population counts based on various socio-demographic criteria. And the criteria they come from are drawn from a number of different sources, which I mentioned before, but let's look at them in a bit more detail. So Delphine will drop that down. So the first few variables you can choose are our NLAS indicators. You can see capability, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, called NLAS 52, salary 52K and below, and 65 plus. We then have a group of data which comes from the census, and you have a range of population, different age groups, income levels, unemployed, single parents, disengaged youth. Disengaged youth, 15 to 24. Disengaged youth are defined by the ABS as young people who are not in employment and not in education. Called people, and a range of all those things you get from the ABS from the census. Then we have Social Security payments. So we've got data from the Department of Social Security. And so, again, by these geographies, we have a range of data there. AB study, Aus study, age pension, carer payments, disability support pensions, healthcare cards, job seeker payment, and the like. Parenting payments, single. We've got single parents above, higher up as well, so you can match these things. Now, we also, in New South Wales at this point, but could be elsewhere, we have some crime data in New South Wales. We are going to be adding more, but that would be another set below that. At the moment, it's only available because criminal data is available jurisdictionally. We've got that in New South Wales. We could put it in other jurisdictions if that data is made available. Okay. All right. So the top row, the colours of the chart, as you see, are reflected. You can see there. And are reflected in the legend down there. So that legend gives you which state. Mind you, if you hover over the charts themselves, you will see the state and the number that appears there. So in NLAS capability by those numbers, you can see that information there. The map is based on the top indicator. So that top indicator, NLAS capability, is on top, and that shows the map. If you change that indicator, you can change anything, but if you change the indicator, that'll change the map. So if we change, say, for example, we're currently NLAS capability, if we get a NLAS call, that's culturally and linguistically diverse, you could see the chart changes, the map changes. And I might add that this pattern we're showing now applies to any level of geography. So if you're doing your local level planning, you change this, the pattern here is you change the indicator and it'll change the distribution of the regions you're looking at accordingly. Let's change to triple R, shall we, Delphine? Rural, region, remote. Again, watch the map and watch it takes a few seconds to change, and you can see it once again changes. So Queensland comes out on top, so to speak. Well, it comes out on top in terms of people in rural, region, remote areas, and so forth. Now, as I said, these charts, you can have any combination of factors. They can be just as you choose them, or they can be particularly targeted ones. I mentioned before, you've got a couple of ones. You've got single parents from the ABS. You can get parent payments, single parent from DSS and so forth. And so you can choose a range. All right. Now, levels of geography. Along the top right-hand side there, you see the levels of geography you can choose. At the moment, we've chosen statistical area, but you could choose LGA, local government area, postcode, or suburb. And so you can break down, you can look at the data by each of those. Now, a slight word of caution is that not all the data is always available at each level. I think, for example, Social Security data is not available at the suburb level. Is that correct, Delphine?
Yes, that's right.
That's right. But generally speaking, we try obviously maximise that we can. And I might add that this is, if you think ahead, this is why how service data is recorded becomes important, is if you want to relate the two, but we'll come back to that later. All right, so levels of geography. So we're looking at statistical area. If you just go over the left-hand side there and drop down, you'll see that each of those levels of geography aggregate to state level. And so if we drop down there, you can actually choose within statistical area. You can choose SA2, SA3, SA4. I guess most of you know these are statistical areas of different sizes that defined by the ABS. I won't go into it now. And you can choose any of those or at the state level. At the moment, it's demonstrated by the state at the state level. Now, all geographies are also able to develop clusters of customized areas. We'll discuss this a bit later, but this becomes a very important thing and something that might be of value in Queensland moving forward, about how we can customize certain areas to be of more ongoing use and make the use of this more rapid. Okay, all right. So that's a bit of a quick overview, a description of the dashboard as you see it. But we might move on now to thinking about now planning. How are we going to use this resource for planning? And there are 3 levels of planning we're thinking about in particular. We're thinking about national, state, and local level. And so here we are. I think that we've seen the national map. We've been focusing nationally. What Delphine's doing now is she's choosing 3 states. She's saying, all right, we decide that we want to compare Queensland, New South Wales, and Victoria. Something special happening on the East Coast, perhaps. And so she's choosing those, and so we can actually compare just the regions we want. So within a region, we just compare how the states are. And you can see for the different variables, you get different outcomes. We can, in fact, change to a different view, to comparison view. So you've got a choice here. You can look at an aggregate view or comparison view. Aggregate view is in one sort of long bar, but comparison view, and I think many people find this more useful, is to compare the states and territories by that. And that's changed to all 6 states. You could go and pick the other 3 again, but this shows you how you can compare the 6 states by particular variables you choose. Not surprisingly, Queensland comes out on top in RRR. We find, I'm not sure why it is that Victoria seems to have so many low-income cards. That's been interesting to me for some time now, but Victorians seem to have a lot of low-income cards, I do think, so there must be something happening down there. The NLS capability, probably not surprisingly, New South Wales has the most there, and that's probably population related. Okay, so looking at nationally, that's letting you compare states, but also cross-border issues. And now this is a big issue, well, not a big issue, this is an important issue down the Victoria-New South Wales border. We've got the Hume Riverina Community Legal Centre that actively operates on both sides. This catchment goes on both sides of the border, and it's funded, I hope I'm not lying here, it's funded by both New South Wales and Victoria. And so cross-border work is very important. And I know, I'm sure it is on the Queensland-New South Wales border as well. And so what you can do is we can zoom into a cross-border area and select an area, an ad hoc area, or it could be a permanent area, looking at a range of areas. So here's Delphine. She's going to delve in, and she's going to grab some areas, looking at from the New South Wales perspective, from about, Moree across to Burke on both sides of the border. And getting a cluster of, she's chosen SA2s and a cluster of regions. And so if you were a CLC or legal aid or service looking at providing services and playing in that region or those regions, you can, across the border poses no problems to this tool. Basically, it allows you to make the appropriate comparisons and decide how you're going to operate. I mean, these indicators are important, not just in telling you, where the need might be, but also, it's an indication to you to say, well, I'm expecting, I'd be given the estimated need or the particular variable I'm looking at, I would be expecting more of these sorts of problems or more of these types of clients from a particular suburb or region or postcode or LGA, and if I'm not getting them, that might tell you something about a whole range of things about communicating, how you're reaching them, outreach, that sort of stuff. These things to think about. Okay. So that's the cross-border thing. Cross-border issues don't pose a problem to this dashboard. Let's now think about jurisdictional level, okay? Getting back within our state, and we'll try and do a bit within Queensland, but sometimes we will focus on New South Wales simply because some of the things we want to show you and the benefits of being able to cluster, if you like, for we've done that already in New South Wales, and it might be useful, at least to demonstrate what we're doing. Now, I am aware that I believe that in Queensland you have divided the state into about 12 or 13 regions, I think, for planning purpose. Otherwise, I could be wrong on that. And certainly, we could certainly, if that information was available, we could certainly do the appropriate clusters in this. So you could look at each of those regions, both at a state level, comparing the regions, or within each of those regions, accordingly and quite simply. And so, if you're interested in that, in this tool being added into this tool, we're more than happy to talk to you about that. But let's just demonstrate how it applies in New South Wales. In New South Wales, we've actually got two sort of levels of division. The older collaborative legal service delivery regions, which many of you might be aware of from the past, don't actually cover the whole state. And so the last couple of years, I guess there was a planning process that actually divided up the state into 20 potential regions, 20 regions, what we call CSP catchments. And Delphine's going on there. So there's 20, and they cover all of New South Wales. It's a fairly new thing. I think I'm not too sure people in many of them would actually know they belong to such a region, but anyway, they break up these 20 regions. And it provides a mechanism at the state level for being able to make comparisons, I guess, to see where the issues are, but across the whole jurisdiction, but by those regions. And once again, you can choose the thing. Now, to do this, the collaborative service planning regions in New South Wales are clusters of suburbs. And so you'll see Delphine has gone and has elected suburb. You can see it's dark there. And so these have been done by suburb, and she's gone to the comparison level. You can then compare them. You might want to look at them at certain things. So, for example, let's just say we wanted to take a look at, we had a youth focus. So you might choose, for example, look at population 24 and under. You might look at disengaged youth as another variable. You might look at Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people 14 years and under. And you might look at disability 14 years and under. So you might have a theme that you're looking at, disability 14 years under. And you might want to see how that pans out and where you should be focusing. And you can see there are some differences there, and it depends if you're focusing on one or other of those groups where you would focus your attention potentially and how you can move it. Now, once again, you can hover over it. You can get hover over the chart and get the actual numbers and so forth. So that's the sort of thing, comparing across your jurisdiction that might be of use. I might add that it's be worth also, we'll come back to comparing that to service data, but for the moment, that's a picture of some of the available data there that allows you to look at all those variables and any other variables we can add in and compare them region to region. So let's turn now down to the local level, which may be in some ways of more relevance to many of you. Local level being down at in that case, the CSP region, or in many cases, the level that meant much of the planning that CLCs might be involved in their local region. That's the generalist CLCs, not so much the specialist ones. Specialists will be looking jurisdictionally. And I should add that jurisdictional level stuff is very obviously for specialist services, looking at their target groups across the whole state. That would be, I would hope, very useful. We'd be very keen to make sure that the right variables are in there to answer the questions for the groups. So if there are other data sources that are particularly relevant to specialist services, for example, we'd be very keen to try and see if that data was available to include in this thing, so you can include that in that exercise as well. All right, back to the local level. And what we'll do is that, again, for using New South Wales as an example, simply because it's probably another way of showing it, we'll go down to LGA. We'll choose LGA this time, and because the collaborative legal service delivery regions in New South Wales have been developed by clusters of LGAs. And I'm not sure in Queensland whether your regions are by clusters of LGAs or not, but they are here. And so what Delphine has chosen, she's chosen one of our regions, which is on the Queensland border, Northern Rivers region, which is, I guess a hot issue these days for the bubble, or otherwise the COVID bubble, the border bubble that comes and goes. But this shows you how and this is a predefined region in New South Wales, if you're looking at local level planning by LGA, you can look at and you can compare the relevant variables that you're interested in, that's relevant to your service, by that geography of LGA. Of course, you could do that by postcode, by suburb, by other statistical area to compare where you think where those variables are, depending on the data availability, and that's what what this tool is for. Okay, now that's a fixed region. That is a region that we know we've already got existing. At the moment, we haven't got that for other states yet. We'd be very keen to get those, Queensland particularly, because we know you've got some areas you did have previously. I assume you do still. So let's go to Queensland now and talk about how you can manually select an area of interest. So even if you had pre-designed regions, you might still, for a particular project or anything, have to say want to define a new region, an ad hoc region for a particular project as an area of interest or whatever. And so we'll go and choose an area up around the Townsville, Mackay area, areas where I have lived. We might Delphine or state LGA and choose a band using the capture tools. Choose a number of LGAs between Mackay and Townsville, and as you can see, and you can obviously expand that and include others, but that will give you some picture of, again, depending on the variables you choose, the picture. Now those variables are quite similar. It depends on what you're looking at. We might change a couple of variables there to say, I'm looking at, for example, Aboriginal, maybe on the second one, Delphine, perhaps look at NLAS, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, for example. And I should say that I think, yes, Palm Island is here, is in this cluster. So and so you can start looking at the variables you're after and to tell you something about obviously the region you're talking about. So you can design any region you want and at the geographies you want and search that. Search the variables for those regions. We hope that is useful. Now, that's looking at LGA, but what about if we go into the suburb? Let's go down to, for suburb, let's go down to Brisbane and see how we go at picking out Brisbane. Again, our knowledge of the Queensland geography is not as good, notwithstanding the fact that I was born there. Go into Brisbane and we'll look at suburb. Obviously, suburbs are very small, but that's part of the point, I guess, in the sense that if you're looking at Brisbane, if you're a service providing services in Brisbane, you might be looking at quite, relatively small area, but a large number of suburbs. So again, Delphine will use a selecting tool to choose a region, small area there. And again, it's just imagining that this was, you can choose regions one by one to make sure you're covering the suburbs or the postcodes or the LGAs that you're interested in, or you could do a broad area like this. Clearly, if you are operating in a certain region for a specific project, you can choose them accordingly and look at the things. Now here we are looking at this region of Brisbane. You can see the Brisbane River meandering through. That's not it's one of the limitations of Tableau. It's not the most beautiful map in the world, but it's still relevant. You can actually see, hover over the suburbs and see the relevant numbers, the counts which you're looking at. In that case, it's children and youth, it's 24, but you can change the indicators as everything else. So you get right down to suburb level, and if you're, for example, a service working in Brisbane, you can just play that. All right. Okay, so that's a quick introduction to the National Legal Needs Dashboard. And can I say that we have on our website, we have a video, we have a couple of videos, 2 videos, an introductory video and then a slightly longer one where Delphine explains how to use it in a how to use it, click here, click there type tool, and for you to look at. We also have a video on our website about estimating legal needs. Some of those earlier slides I showed you appear in that video there, so you can. In fact, it's perhaps a more comprehensive video. I'd suggest it's only about 10 minutes long. It's not a bad video to look at, and you can see those there. Now, Delphine is now going to be changing to the second of our dashboards. Criminal finalisation dashboard.
Jeff, sorry, I'll just quickly jump in. There is also a document with explanatory notes that include definitions of all those indicators,
right? Okay.
Where the data is sourced from, and what date it's when it was sourced. So there's not only a tutorial video on how to use the dashboard, but also explanatory notes that are useful to look at if you're going to use the dashboard.
Thanks, Delphine. And okay, so Delphine will be changing. We've got a second as she changes dashboards. Just keeping on the time though, does anyone have any urgent questions that we should address while she's changed that dashboard?
Hi, Jeff. No urgent questions, just a request to hopefully have the slides made available following the session, and noting what you've also said around some of those other resources available. So that's all for now.
Okay. So how are you going there, Delphine? So moving on to what we call the finalizations dashboard. And as an introduction, in terms of, and this may or may not be as relevant for CLCs because it's focusing on criminal law, criminal matters, although many of you do some criminal work. But it was developed out of really a request from the Aboriginal Legal Service in New South Wales, and to develop a finalizations dashboard as the best indicator of need for criminal representation services in courts or criminal services in courts. Now, I can't see the dashboard at this point. Is that because I've got something?
Sorry, Jeff, I stopped sharing my screen because my screen was frozen. It's just gone back to live. I'll just give 1 more minute so you can keep going. Okay.
So basically, you know, the indicator, the question is if you know the criminal representation work, duty work happens in courts mainly, and so a lot of it happens in courts or related to courts. And so that if we could collect the actual finalizations data or something close to that, we could get a pretty good picture of the demand for legal assistance services in the criminal space. We did it first in New South Wales. We then subsequently did it in Queensland. And on our website, there is in fact a report we published which looks at not finalizations, but look at appearances in criminal courts across Queensland. And that's worth having a look. But what we've done here in New South Wales is we're updating it. And basically what we've done is we've got the criminal finalizations data across all 146 courts across New South Wales. It's a nice thing. And over about 8 years, calendar years, look at all courts and defendants, and we can choose certain regions. Now, in terms of local level planning, I'll come back to local level planning in a minute, but certainly overall, let's have a look at a quick picture. On the right-hand side, top right-hand side, you see a trend. And you'll see a trend at the moment that's looking at all courts over 8 calendar years. And that shows you the trend of criminal finalizations, which shows an increase to about 2007, then a progressive decrease. That's in all courts and all defendants. Now, if we change the court and perhaps look at just children's court, we see in actual fact a positive trend that's going down. And that's probably a positive sign, I'd imagine, in New South Wales. But let's go back to the all courts again, and we can see the pattern again. And let's look at the non-Indigenous defendants. Now, this is a very much Indigenous, non-Indigenous focused dashboard. We would like to look at other groups, but as I said, it was developed out of a project for the originally for the Aboriginal Legal Service here in New South Wales. So there we have the non-Indigenous, and we see it's a similar pattern, although the decrease in the last couple of years has been a bit more than the average or the overall. If we now look at Indigenous defendants, we find that in fact it doesn't dip, it plateaus. It's up slightly, but probably just a plateau. And so that tells us something. Now, we will have 2020 data quite soon, and I think COVID has had some impacts. We've got to sort that out yet. But this sort of thing is a useful thing as a general point. But from a local level planning, from a jurisdictional planning purpose, but also local level planning, I mean, this has been something that is useful for saying, I want to plan a certain region. So, Delphine, you might just go down to clusters, and as for the purposes of this, we developed a number of clusters. We looked at CLC catchments, we looked at ALS clusters for ALS officers, and we can actually see which courts are serviced by which one. So let's just choose one. Let's just clues. So Delphine will just choose one of the catchments, and we'll go Central West, and we might see, and we'll see that Central West catchment, you might do it by court then as well, but you can see the numbers of within the Central West. So you can actually look at just the Central West region. You can see there are just those courts highlighted. You can look at where the trends are, up, down, consistent. You can actually see the trend going up. The state trend is going down, but the trend there is going up. So from a local planning perspective, of which the CLC, of course, is clearly part of this process, the fact that you've got this trend, you've seen this on the criminal side, this is relevant as well. So this sort of data is a very important tool for legal need as well. And this is quite in many ways, it's a precise tool. All right, so that's criminal finalisations. I won't go any further into that. At the moment, the data is only available to us in New South Wales. More than happy to talk to other states and Queensland in particular, if that was something that would be of use in your planning process. And I'll move on to the third dashboard as Delphine's making the change to the third dashboard, which is really a dashboard in development. So that criminal finalisations dashboard is on our website now. It's been available for a couple of months, and you can use it now, as you can with the National Legal Needs dashboard. For the third one is really a group of 3 dashboards. And if you remember back to my early comments at the start about the fact that you really like to be able to put service data in relation to needs data. So what we're developing, and it's obviously still under development, is a set of dashboards that does exactly that. It's the needs dashboard. It's a slightly different format to the one you've seen for most of the session today. This dashboard will be amended to the new format that you've seen. But effectively, there's a needs dashboard that would be as you've just been demonstrated. But there'd be a second and a third dashboard. The second dashboard is the services dashboard, which Delphine will just click on. And what this would be is a dashboard that would, provided unit record data was available, would be allowed your service data to be put into a dashboard like this. And at the moment we're using fake data in this, so this is not real data, it is fake data, and it's just in New South Wales. But I imagine for any service, this would be a useful tool for you to have individually, whether or not anyone else had access to it, because it breaks it down by where services of different types, looking at areas of law, service type, matter group, gender, age group, Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander or otherwise, are actually delivered. And civil, criminal, family, you can set down the centre there. You can look at all services, well, the way it is at the moment, or let's go down and choose CLCs for the moment. And again, this is fake data. This is fake data. Let me just make that point again. Not ridiculous data, but fake data. If we choose CLCs, you'll probably see a different pattern. You see at the moment down there in area of law, you've got civil, criminal, family. We click onto CLC and there'll be a different distribution, much less criminal, civil, again, fake data. But a couple of things about that. We can also break it down, breakdown by gender. So Delphine, you might just show the breakdown by gender. So you'll see the same data. It takes about 12 seconds each time there's a key update. Breakdown by gender, so you can see actually the proportion of services that are male, female in this case. Down the bottom left-hand side, you see there's a scrollable scale there by region. We're looking at SA2 here, and this looks at the number of services delivered in those regions. Now, of itself, that of course this is the whole service data dilemma. The fact that there are more services delivered in Blacktown West than say Fairfield or scroll down further somewhere else, of itself might not mean anything because the population levels, the demographics, the need varies. So of itself, service data, you've got to make it doesn't tell you much about that. That orange line down the middle, of course, that orange line down that is the mean. And so there are many services, if you scroll down further, that fall below that. But there's no magic right or wrong answer here. But it is a convenient way of, it would be a convenient way of having access, or you having access to your own data, in fact. But where this is heading, potentially, is other than being a useful thing for that perspective, is let's go to the third rate, which is the ratio dashboard. And this is where it would allow you to relate a particular type or a type or a part of your service delivery to a particular needs variable. In other words, so let's just say, for example, we're looking at New South Wales. So let's just say, you can once again choose these things. Let's just say we want to look at services to older people, 65 years and over. And so we would choose services to people 65 years and over. But we need to actually then have a needs variable that was relevant to that. So let's go to over this on the right hand side there, there's a needs indicator. And we'll choose our need for legal assistance services 65 years plus. And you'll watch, that will now apply, and you'll see the whole order, the relevant proportion changes. So what that tells you, what you're doing here then, is you would be demonstrating, again, it's fake service data. What you would be doing is saying, all right, we know how many older people are in this region, and based on our indicator of need for legal assistance services, which means we're understanding people who have lower education, low income, 65 years and over, who are likely, if they have a legal problem, to need legal assistance. And then we're looking at the number of services delivered to people in that category, if you like, in the different regions. You see that there still are quite significant differences. Now, there's no magic answer. There's no magic one that is the right answer, because, as you know, every need is different. Every person is different. Some services, some needs with some people might take only a couple of services. Others need a whole lot more. So there's no right or wrong answer. But from a planning perspective, if you were looking at this and saying in the region I'm looking at, or in this case, it's looking at a state level, but remember, you could do this at your local level. This suburb versus that suburb, you know, we're doing more in suburb X than in suburb Y. At jurisdictional level, we're doing more proportionally in Sydney, Haymark, Darlinghurst, Chullora than, scroll down, Delphine. If you scroll down the right-hand side, doing a lot more there than we are down here, say down there in Willoughby, in Nyngan, Narrabri, Cowra, Walter, Cromer. Now, those are regional areas, but the point is the ratio is actually relating the services delivered to the needs. So in actual fact, it should deal with those issues, and it should be saying to yourself, well, okay, maybe we should think about that. What does that mean for any future funding or future targeting, our future planning of outreach services or something? What might that tell us? All right, so you might pop out of that now, Delphine. All right, now that's taken probably too much of your time, I'll just, can I share my screen to finish off the last slide, if I may, the last couple of slides. Thank you. I'll show my screen now. If I can bring it up. Okay, so we are very keen to get information from you or your needs. What data, we'd like you to look at the dashboards, particularly the National Legal Need Dashboard, to say, what would we like? What data there that's useful for us? What other data sources might be useful for us? How can we improve the tool? We also are planning in the next few months a knowledge hub, following that cycle I mentioned, with a whole range of information and tools to assist with whether it be client surveys, evaluation, assessing legal need, and so forth. There's going to be a whole on a microsite or a separate standalone site in the next perhaps month or two. We hope to release that, which we hope will be useful to you. And finally, we'd please, if you have any questions, email us there, ask us, subscribe to our research alerts, because if you subscribe to that, every time we put something else, a new bit of data goes into one of the dashboards, we put out a research alert, you'll be aware of it, and you'll see that sort of stuff. So, and as I said, on our website, we have a range of videos and tools that will explain some of the things that we've gone through today. So, difficult. That's the presentation. It's taken probably a few minutes of your time more than I wanted. But do you have any questions that we do now? We're happy to take questions subsequently by email or by phone. More than happy to. And happy to speak to anyone separately. But do you have any questions for us now?
Great, thanks, Jeff and Delphine. There have been a couple of questions that have come through. So, firstly, a relatively easy question, and maybe Delphine can help with this one, just maybe with a quick demo. So Jess was wondering, is there a trick to selecting more than one area on the map? So Delphine, can I just ask you to share your screen again, and perhaps you can just show us, and I think this is probably on the first legal needs dashboard.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, just let me get back to, I seem to be having issues with the screen now. It's frozen again. What I can say, there are different tools, different ways to select more than one area. So we can actually select by name at the bottom of the screen. And I don't know if you can see, it doesn't seem to let me go into presentation mode. So it's going to be not as user-friendly. But at the bottom of the screen in the dashboard, there's a list of names with just tick boxes. So that's one way to select areas. On the map, there's a couple of ways to select. as well. So either by having a kind of a selecting tool that allows you to drag over particular areas and select all those areas within what you've selected, or to click on each area one by one. So there are various ways to select areas on the dashboard.
Are you still frozen, Delphine?
Yes.
Are you?
Well,
Are you still frozen?
The screen is. It's not letting me going back into presentation.
If you want to share, I can show that very quickly. The tool very quickly. If you share back to me. Okay, I'll just open up the dashboard there. So on the left-hand side of the map, you've got the tools here, and you can do it either by, you can move it, or you can use a lasso or a rectangle.
Right. So that's right. That is the selecting, the selecting tool on the map that allows you selecting directly from the map, or at the bottom of the screen, you can use tick boxes.
Yeah. So you can do that, and you can do a circle, and it covers those four. You pick obviously on regions. So that's how you do that. It's as simple as that. You click out in the ocean to unclick basically to your previous selection.
Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks.
Again, I would recommend looking at the tutorial video. Actually goes into a lot more details, the kind of the practical, aspect of using the dashboard in Tableau for those who are not familiar with Tableau.
Great. So Jess has also asked on the legal needs dashboard whether there's an option to choose breach bail conditions, breach DV orders, and any other DV related breakdown. So in terms of legal issues there, or is it just sort of population type data?
Okay, is my screen still shared at the moment?
Yep.
Well, up on the screen, I've got. So we actually weren't going to. So the answer is yes. It's not there at the moment. So let me just oh no, it's going. Let me just sorry, it jumped. Let me come back down to the one there. I should have started the same spot. So basically, yes, what we've done is we've only, as an example, in New South Wales included. Can you see that? Can you read that? Beach apprehended violence order, breach bail, and domestic violence assault. But all of these other data, this other data here could be included in that. And so I guess what we're after in New South Wales, and with anyone else going to do it, was which of the offence categories, which of the subcategories, if you like, that are of most use to you in your planning. We chose those ones as examples.
Yeah.
The more you put in, the more data you put in, the slower these things go. So we don't just want lots of data sitting there to just take longer and longer. You can put more data in there, but I guess we're trying to say which of the ones are going to be most used, and then we'll look at including them.
Great. So Jess has just come back and said that the options are there, but there's no data. And so obviously Jess is from Queensland, so it's only showing New South Wales.
Crime data is only available for New South Wales at this point.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. There you go. And
we would love. So we'd love it to be national, but anyway, go on. So.
And is there a rough time frame of when Queensland might be available, do you think, Jeff, or is that sort of unknown at the moment?
Well, we have to engage the states to see if they'd provide that information. We have in New South Wales, we have the Bureau of Crime Stats and Research, which is a good, I guess, conduit. Can I say that when we did the criminal finalizations dashboard, Queensland was very, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn. Queensland was very forthcoming, Delphine, were very helpful. We got the data we wanted, and that was very good. So I guess there's no reason to expect that Queensland might not be willing to bring the data. Of course, there's a big question about whether the data is available and the quality of the data. That's not a criticism. It's a matter of, Boxar has been around for about 40 years in New South Wales, and they spent a lot of time, making sure that definitions are consistent and understood, and the data is a certain way. We shouldn't be surprised that across other states and territories it may not be the case. Indeed, one of the things that came out of the criminal finalizations work was that for something such as Indigenous status, how differently and quite frankly poorly that was either recorded or not recorded in some states, and which just shows you how, unfortunately, that in the legal sector, we're not always very good with our data collection across all jurisdictions.
That's right. If I can just add, is we do know from experience that the availability of data and the quality of data can vary a lot from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but also the consistency. Obviously, having a national a dashboard at national level implies some consistency across the data set. So we'd have to actually look a little bit more into that. But if there is definitely interest, that's something we can look into, see if we can source the data, if it's available, and to what extent it compares with what we already have in the dashboard, and if not, how do we handle the discrepancies, I guess. But that's something we can work on. Adding new data to the dashboard is a possibility. We just need to see to what extent data is available.
Fantastic. A question's just come through. I think I know the answer, but it'd be good just to double check that with you. So Zeni has asked whether the dashboards will be made available via subscription or if they're all freely available online.
At the moment, they're freely available online. Absolutely. Yes, at the moment, our intent would be to make it. I mean, the National Legal Needs Dashboard is available freely online. I guess at that stage we haven't thought about. I mean, I guess if we had to go to other states and spend money to get data off other states and territories to provide it, notwithstanding all the limitations that Delphine's mentioned, that might be considered in the future. But it would be our intent to try and make this as available as possible.
Excellent. That's a really good response, and hopefully that can happen. Just a couple of other questions from me, Jeff and Delphine. So in dashboard 3, so I think that's the one that's sort of in more of a better sort of stage at the moment. Just curious about where the services data is coming from. Is that services delivered, and is anything coming from our class database that we use in CLC land, or is that elsewhere? Okay,
so that's why I made the point a few times, it's fake data. And of course, the whole service data issue is a sensitive thing for various reasons. And certainly in New South Wales, for many years, we've been getting service data from legal aids, CLCs in New South Wales for what we do things called the data digest. But we understand that's obviously very sensitive. Also, with the NLAP now, services are going to be providing data to the ABS as part of the NLAP requirement. But that data, I don't think, is going to be available for including this sort of thing, nor might it be necessarily comprehensive. In that, if not all the players provide all their data, they just provide Commonwealth funded data, then you're sort of getting a different picture. I guess what we're trying to do is we're just trying to demonstrate what's possible. And it would obviously, any data provided to us would be, and included in that sort of tool, would only be as agreed by the services, and limited access would be limited appropriately, because obviously service data would be sensitive, particularly to small numbers. But it's really exploring, saying what might be possible, what might people allow. But no, at the moment we have not used anybody's data in that sense, no. But we've made fake data, which is quite sensible, and to demonstrate the capability. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's great. Thank you. Last opportunity for any other questions coming through, but this one's also from me. So I believe there's been a recent change, or there's about to be a change to the definition that we use in CLCs of older people. So I noticed in your drop-down menu you had 65 years plus. I believe that for First Nations people that's been changed to 50 years plus. So is that also going to be reflected in the database in the legal needs dashboard? Do you know?
Yes, that's correct. So in the NLAP, the priority group, older people, is defined as people aged 65 and over, or for First Nations people, those are aged 55 and over. This is something we are considering. We may update the NLAS indicator 65 plus to actually an NLAS indicator older people that matches the definition of the NLAP priority group. That's something that we are currently considering. Yes. So it's not available yet, but we're thinking about what's the best way to go about this, to make sure we ideally provide information that matches with the definitions or the groups that you're looking at, of course.
Yeah,
we are collecting. That's the point of this phase at the moment is, and that's one reason why this sort of presentation we find is useful, if we can get some ideas about which of the data sets, which particular variables would be useful to the sector, and these sorts of things. Because, as I said, this is a beta prototype version. We do want to make changes. We're making changes already with the criminal finalizations one. We're about to add in 2020 data and so forth, but we want to make changes moving forward. and we want to try, obviously that's probably easy to do in a batch run, so to speak. So we are looking at those sorts of things where we can. It's not always as easy as it's sounds, but it's all about data availability as well.
Mm.
That's right. If I can just add very quickly, and I know, Jeff, you've mentioned it a few times, but just to ask for feedback. We obviously want those tools to be useful to the sector. So if there's a particular indicator that is not useful or that would be useful but is missing, please let us know, because some of them we can tweak and change. Some we might not be able to, but we're more than happy to look into this. And there will be, future iterations and development of the legal needs dashboard where we remove data that might not be useful or add other data sets that might be more useful for the sector. So the more feedback we have, the better we can customize this tool to your needs, obviously.
Yeah. So, for example, some of the feedback we've had in New South Wales has been about fines and debt. And now we're establishing a relationship with Revenue New South Wales. Hopefully, we'll be able to look at their data. Everyone seems very keen to look at that. Also, data such as, and particularly the fines and debt data, particularly with all the quite expensive public health order fines. That's going to be an interesting dimension in the months ahead. But certainly also school exclusions and partial expulsions and so forth. I'm not sure the data is going to be there for that, but certainly that's an area that people in New South Wales have come back and said that local regional planning groups have said they really like that sort of information. So, yeah, feedback like that. We're interested in seeing what's there so we can actually explore what's possible.
Excellent.
That's right. And we're also looking at adding indicator by gender to have some indicators for relations. So that was a request from Women's Legal Services.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, fantastic. Well, that's all the questions that have come through for the moment, and we will share that email address when we send out the recording, just in case anyone else has some other feedback or wants to get in touch with either of you or have a chat. But for now, I'll just a quick reminder to the people that are still online to fill out the feedback survey that will pop up automatically at the close of this presentation. Your feedback's really helpful for us to make sure that the webinars are meeting your needs and that we can continually improve our program. And I'll now also say a very big thank you to Jeff and Delphine for their time and expertise today. There have been some comments coming through saying it's really great information to have, and hopefully this is a good sort of point and opportunity for CLCs particularly to go out and test the legal needs dashboard and put it to use in their own centres for planning purposes. So thank you so much on behalf of everyone who's joined us today, and thank you also for the great questions that came through, and we'll pop that recording up this afternoon.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. See you later.
Bye-bye.